So welcome, How We Listen Live, the knowledge to move your music forward. So the agenda for today, like I was saying, basically I talk quickly about Byta, so you know who we are and what we do. We talk about how we listen, which is very important to what we do. Then I give a couple announcements, including who's coming to the next event, all that kind of stuff. And then in part two, we've got a conversation with Kevin Breuner. And Kevin, I hope I said your name right. You can correct me later if I haven't. So my name is Mark Brown. For people I haven't met before, I'm the founder and CEO of Byta. And as you can hopefully tell from my accent, I'm Canadian. I spent a load of time there. Then I moved to the UK, and now I live in Stockholm, Sweden. And as I say every time, and I'm going to continue to repeat it, it's very, very good when you listen to people speak and you're taking advice from other people that you learn their backgrounds and learn how they see the world and what their perspective is. And so for me, I started at a small independent record label in Canada, basically before the internet started, or it was very early days in the mid-90s, back when everything was still physical. So no iTunes, none of that kind of stuff. Then I moved to the UK, and I worked in the A&R department at the legendary Creation Records, Oasis, Super Furry Animals, Primal Scream. And the internet was sort of rolling around that time. Then I worked at another boutique label called Pop Tones, where I started doing radio promotion. And then after that, I left there and started my own boutique radio promotion company. I did radio and TV promotion. And that's when things were really to start to roll with the internet. And I realized that the way people sent and received digital audio was pretty bad. So that's why we decided to start Byta. So what is Byta? Byta is the platform that enables sending and receiving of digital audio in a clean, simple, and secure way, built for everyone working with music today. And what does that mean? Fast and secure audio sharing. That's what everybody does all the time, sending and receiving files and streams, and we make it fast and secure. So what does that mean in practice? Like, how is Byta different? Well, Byta takes advantage of audio files' unique properties, and there are three key ones that I want to mention. Byta reads and writes file metadata. So you hear the word metadata all the time, but there's information embedded in those audio files that you send and receive all the time. And so we read and write that information, including WAV metadata, MP3 metadata, all types. File format and audio quality. So you can with Byta, you can upload in one file format and share in another. And then streamability. So we have fast yet secure streaming. So unlike other platforms, you can't rip our links. And everybody knows that stream ripping is the way people get copies of stuff pre-release. And if you want to know anything more about audio sharing, we published a white paper about a year ago, and it basically explains everything we know about how people send and receive digital audio files and streams. So Jamie will throw a link in the chat to that if you want to read for yourself about how to better share digital audio. But you know, we realize that it's not just about a tool for sharing audio. There's also another side to it. And so our mission statement as a company is to provide artists and their teams with the tools and the knowledge to move their careers forward. So as I said, easy to see what we're talking about. Byta is a tool for sharing audio, simple. But what about the knowledge side? How do we pass the information that we have about what we know best, digital audio, and pass that on to other people? And that's what we call How We Listen. And so what's How We Listen? It started as an interview series about 3 years ago, where people answer 10, I think, standard questions about how they find, listen to, and experience music. And this comes out of the frustration, the fact that we realized we read a lot online, and a lot of the time it was just articles about how the way to move your music forward or to find success in any way is, just algorithms. You'll release your music and an algorithm picks it up and everything goes great. Or, oh yeah, if you get on a playlist, no problem. Once you're on a playlist, everything's going to happen. And we know that those things aren't correct. That's just, you know, algorithms are not your savior. And being on the top of Spotify's most popular playlist isn't going to be the solution everybody needs, right? So we get a lot of really interesting insights from these How We Listen articles. And what I like to do is share one or two every month, just to give people an idea what other people in and around the world are saying about their insights in sharing digital audio and how they find and discover music. So Mar, if I remember correctly, is Canadian. And I believe they run a, they've run a label before. That's how I know them. But they work at a couple other different places. And so I'll just read the quote. I listen to music 99% of the time on MP3. I'm old, and though I hate owning physical products, I like to own the file to be able to listen to it on my terms whenever I want, without data, Wi-Fi. And I also need MP3 files for my radio show. What I think is super interesting about this is when I started doing radio, they wanted WAV files. So it's actually changed. Now the quality of audio on the radio is only MP3s. But this shows how a lot of people, contrary to the idea that everybody listens to stuff streaming wise, that a lot of people still want audio files because they like to be in control. And Mars is a perfect example of that. And we have another series called Method to My Music, which is focused more on people who are creating music, so artists, producers, and all. People like that, instead of How We Listen, which is more focused on people who work in and around music, on the maybe the more business side. And so Tempo, who's an artist producer, says, everything in music happens based on relationships. And I know all of you know this already, but that it is all about relationships. If you're good with people, you'll land some unbelievable collaborations. And we all know how important collaborations are these days. I'm pretty good at keeping the positive vibe going in a studio full of collaborators. So I prefer in-studio sessions. So I think this guy's totally on it. He knows exactly what he's talking about. And then he also mentioned this, which I thought was super interesting. I have previously shared my work in progress with a friend producer who then shared it with his friend. And next thing we hear my original loop in a commercial song. Like you could almost, you can't even make it up. Like, it's crazy that this stuff happens, but this is why it's important to keep an idea or keep a handle on who you send your music to, because you never know where it's going to end up. So he's a Byta user, and he says, thanks to Byta, we can now securely control and share streams and downloads in the right file formats. So it's not just people at big record companies are worried about music falling into sort of the wrong hands or getting, you know, out to other people. I don't like to use the word leak anymore, but, you know, he brings up a really good point that you got to watch who you share your audio with. And then a third series that we started earlier this year, maybe, is called Digital Dialogue. And this is a more deep dive into a certain subject that the author is familiar with or, you know, an expert in. And the most recent one is by Jessica from AudioShake. Jessica used to work at Google. I think she's actually written a book about management, possibly. Surely you all heard AudioShake. If not, Google it and take a look. And she talks about simplifying instant gratification tracks and collaborations. And so Jessica says, we're also moving into a world where music will be all around us, not just in the way we know today. And she is completely correct about this. So she says sitting in a car or bedroom, listening to a track. But she's saying also buying new formats and experiences that are beginning to emerge. Many of those formats will be based on being able to pull apart and remix and rearrange how, when, and where a song is heard. And she's completely right. And that's what AudioShake do. They deal with separating songs in stems via AI. Totally worth checking out. And it's a great article. Jamie will throw it in the chat. So I've talked about how we listen. I talked about method to my music. I've talked about digital dialogue. And now here we are talking about how we listen live. And so what's how we listen live? Well, what we realized with the interviews, they're on, they're online, they're easy to read, they're standard questions. But we found that also it would be really interesting to talk to some people who have either done the interviews before or are experts in a certain area, and do it live together online, get people together, get them to ask questions, so we can really sort of maybe understand subjects a little better than you do from just reading a static interview online. And that's exactly why we're doing it. One thing I like to highlight every time is that everybody who does these, everybody does it for free. Everybody, Byta puts it together, all our guests, no one's getting paid. And so in turn, what we do is we give a little money to Maytree, which is a respite for people who are feeling suicidal in London. And this is a super important place for us. And mental health is a super important issue for everyone, not just in music. So take a screenshot of this, check it out if you want, give them some money, or I'm sure there's a local organization you support, or just keep it in the back of your mind. You never know when someone you know might need help. Here are my details. This is where I joke every time. I'm supposed to talk about some blog post I wrote, but I haven't written one in ages. I guess I'm too busy doing these events. So you can get a hold of me at visnomics.com if you can't remember, but I'll throw my details up in a second here. But a couple more announcements. So we got a Facebook group. We post loads of stuff in there if you like to get your info that way. There's a link. Jamie throws it in the chat. We've got a YouTube channel. And the reason I like to mention this every time is, as I'm sure you all know, when you sign up for one of our events, you get a link to come to the actual event. But if you miss it, or if you can't get up at 4 in the morning, like our friend from Australia on the call today, you're automatically going to get a link in the next few days to the audio via Byta. Then, and I think it's a week later, everything goes up as a podcast now, as well as being posted on YouTube. So if you can't make an event, or if you miss something and you want to figure out what somebody said, or you thought of a perfect piece of advice, you sort of missed it, you can listen again somewhere else. So don't be taking notes. You don't need to worry about it. Sit back and listen and enjoy. And then you can catch up on it again later if you want to research stuff in more depth. Hey, look, there's my same toque in the background there. Wool hat. Then, as we like to do, we're announcing the next event, How We Listen Live with Sadaya Blount. Hopefully I got that right. She works at Sonos Radio. I'm looking forward to this because I know who she is and I've known about her for ages. So this is going to be super exciting. The Transforming Audio Culture, Elevating the Art of Music Discovery. There'll be a link in the chat. Come along. It should be fun. Then screenshot this. If you ever want to get a hold of me, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's always good. Happy to connect. If you ever want any help with anything, just write to me. Yeah, that's it. And Kevin, are you somewhere?
There you
are.
I'm here.
Is that a hotel lounge?
It is. It's on one of the it's top floors or something. I don't know. I just found a quiet spot somewhere.
Okay, and so show them a little behind the scenes. Tilt your computer over, and what's that?
That's the elevators.
All right.
And right behind me, it drops straight down 26 floors. So
no expense spared here. No expense spared.
That's right.
So where are you then? Tell us where you are first.
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm speaking Music Biz, that organization. They have an event here tonight that we are sponsoring, and I'm speaking on a panel and giving a quick little presentation about CD Baby. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay, and so what we like to do, so I think your introduce you properly, I think you're the first person we've had. This is about event number 15, 16. You're the first person we've had who's a musician, but also works in sort of the business part of it. So I want to spend a bit of more time than we normally would talking about that kind of stuff. But so tell us, where do you normally live and what you do exactly first?
I am the SVP of Artist Engagement and Education for CD Baby. We're a music distribution company based out of Portland, Oregon. That's where I live. And really my role there, at one point I was running the whole marketing team, and it got so big, we split it off into two branches. So my team really does all the content marketing. So we do the podcast, DIY Musician Podcast, the blog. We do our conferences and events, and you know, anything related to content outreach. And we just started an influencer program that my team is building. So all that kind of stuff falls under my role at CD Baby. I used to manage the entirety of the marketing department, which also included like all our campaigns and advertising and all that. So pretty much anything related to promotion I've touched at some point, both for work and for my band endeavors as well.
Okay, so explain this band stuff, because I think your band didn't start in Portland, is that correct? Were you living in Nashville? Is that?
I was living in Nashville. The band is actually based here in Atlanta. So I come to Atlanta.
I'm confused.
I come to Atlanta all the time. Yeah, I went to college to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee to study music and music business. I'm a guitar player. And while I was there, my roommate was friends with these guys here in Atlanta that were looking for a guitar player. And I started playing with them. And anyone need a towel while they're going by?
Vacuum? Did you see the vacuum?
They needed a guitar player, and I started playing with them. And when I walked into our first rehearsal, they were actually sending out 3-song demo tapes to all the labels, because this was the mid 90s. It was a different world back then. And so I started playing. They already had a bunch of shows booked. I started playing with them, and by the end of that summer, we were signed to a label under the EMI umbrella, and away we went with, you know, our music career. And we're still making music. You know, we had 4 albums on a label, and then the band took a hiatus, and but then we started making records and releasing songs independently since, you know, I work at CD Baby. And so yeah, we've been doing music together for almost 25 years.
Wow. So but when we were talking last week, you were telling me something interesting. So what style of music is it?
Well, as far as like how we sound, we
Yeah,
get
how you
compared
sound.
to, I would compare it to like bands like Death Cab for Cutie now. But back in the day, we always got compared to the Gin Blossoms, Counting Crows, REM. Our producer who produced our first 2 albums also did the Gin Blossom records.
Okay.
So great. It was a great experience working with him. We recorded in Memphis, Tennessee at Ardent Studios, a very storied recording studio there in Memphis. And yeah, so but yeah, when the band went on the hiatus, I thought, okay, I'm probably done with music. I was doing a lot of photography, and it just felt easier, more controllable than managing or being in a band with 4 other people and the whole thing that goes with it. But then I just started writing and recording like crazy. And I was in the Northwest. I'd moved up to the Northwest, and at that time started a band. We made CDs and came across CD Baby as a way to distribute it, and started using CD Baby for my own music. And then in 2006 got a job there, and I've been working there for almost 17 years now. So I've seen a lot as far as how the industry on the independent side has grown and exploded and changed and shifted over time. And a lot of you know, what we do for artists is still in essence the same, and we help them monetize their music fully, but how that's done now is completely different than from when I first started there in 2006.
But I thought one of the most interesting things you were telling me,
Yeah.
so your band was also like sort of like from a Christian background.
Yes, yes,
which,
that's right. That's right.
But I think this is super interesting, especially considering how many international people we have on this call, that especially back in the 90s, this was a huge market, was it not?
Yes.
That if people, if I understand it correctly, there were loads of different genres of bands that all fell under the umbrella of that it was, say, Christian religious music. Is that how you would describe it?
Yes, yes. It was actually a very exciting time. I mean, if you grew up in the church or listening to that kind of music, it, you know, it was just exploding with so many new bands and so many genres that previously didn't exist in that, under that umbrella. And so it was a very exciting time, and a lot of those bands were making inroads on the mainstream. Groups like Jars of Clay, DC Talk were getting played on, you know, VH1 and MTV, and it was just exploding. And you know, we were having a lot of success as well. We sold a lot of records. We were nominated for a Grammy, nominated for multiple Dove Awards, which is like the Christian market's version of the Grammys. And but then in, you know, our conversation that we had earlier this week, what happened is that it got really wide, and then the whole genre of worship music came out, and the whole industry, that segment of the industry, just focused in on that, and that's not what we were. And that happened, and was really happening when the band was on hiatus. And so over time, as we started releasing music independently, for us the interesting thing is just like trying to figure out who our audience is now, and where they are, and because we're not that worship band that a lot of people in our previous, you know, that, you know, all our past connections and people we know, that's what that industry wants now, and that's not what we do. And so for us, it's just been an interesting thing as we release music independently, trying to find who our audience is now. We have our classic fans that know us from, you know, our first two records were the ones that had a lot of success. So we always have fans that want to hear us play those songs, you know, and we're like, we love those songs, but as artists, we've grown, and as songwriters, we've grown and changed and have lots of new music since then, but you might want to check it out. But then, so those fans just kind of tend to stay in that era, but trying to like, where is that audience now that likes what we do? It's, you know, and yeah, so I'm in the trenches just with every other artist, all the artists coming at CD Baby. You know, I'm out there trying things. I'm out there using tools to build audiences, running ad campaigns, doing it all just for my own music. And, you know, obviously we see other artists having success in various ways. And through the content we produce at CD Baby, we're always trying to like interview those people, highlight those success stories, highlight the things that artists are doing that are working, and strategies that are working as everything shifts, because everything's shifting quickly, especially in the last 3-4 years. A lot has changed. And so, yeah.
Well, because I think like that was the key thing that I felt you said, was this idea that, you know, you couldn't be in a better position being in that market back in the 90s, and then to feel like suddenly, we don't know who our fans are, is completely relevant to what we're discussing today. This idea that, okay, who are we as a band, and how do we reach the people we want to reach? And I think like that's really what I want to start focusing in on. So when you started at CD Baby, what year was that again?
2006.
Okay, so what were you, and do I remember correctly, were you just sitting there fielding calls from artists all the time?
All day long.
and what was that like? Hey, how do I put a record out? Or
oh, it was everything. You know, in 2006, the common question I'd get was, how do I get signed to a label? How do I get a label to notice me? How do I, you know, or how do I get gigs? And a lot of it, you know, we had been distributing digitally to iTunes since 2004, but that concept was still brand new. iTunes was still growing. Like, it wasn't, you know, a lot of people think of iTunes and think about the MP3 era and like they were so dominant, but back then they were still just building and educating the consumer market about how MP3s work, and MP3 players were all over the map as far as usability and all that kind of stuff. Um, so we would be talking about, oh yes, you can get your music on iTunes. All you got to do is, you know, sign up and upload it, and we'll send it out there. And so just in general, most, I would have described it as the independent market was so new still, and the idea of going directly to your fans was still so new that a lot of those calls were just helping people understand the opportunity and that it was accessible to them. They didn't need a label. And then on the other hand, you know, so many new online platforms were emerging. I remember one of the things that led me to start the DIY Musician podcast, which we've been doing since 2007, was I'd take a phone call, you know, have that conversation with an artist, like, I need to be on a label. I'm like, I'd walk them through everything about how they could build an audience directly themselves. And that was more important first, because a label is going to expect you to have done that at this point. The days of them picking diamonds out of the rough out of a club randomly on a Friday night is not how the world we live in anymore. And so I'd hang up with that artist, and then I'd pick up the phone and I'd talk to somebody, and they're like, yeah, I'm using this new platform called YouTube, and I've been making videos, and I've been making all these fans. I don't even have to tour or play shows anymore. It's changing how I think about everything. I'm like, tell me everything you know. I want to know exactly what you're doing. And I'd be sitting there taking notes. And I was a podcast junkie at the time. And so I'm like, I need to make a podcast. Or I was like, I need to make these, wish I could record these phone calls and make them available to everybody, because all this information is so good. And so that's what led me to start the podcast and our blog and everything, just like those conversations I was having with artists for 8 solid hours every day.
Like, and I was thinking, like, when you mentioned iTunes, I'm like, oh, well, like, maybe we should explain what iTunes is, considering it's so long ago that people forget. You know, so like, but you know, that's a bit ridiculous. It's a bit of a joke, but like, so let's, if we're talking 2006, you know, we're whatever, how many years ahead in the future. Like, what do you think? What do you think is? Let's go through, what do you think is different now than before? And then what's the same? Like, because I find that the landscape's changed a lot, but the basic principles are the same. And I think we should separate those before we talk about release planning and developing an audience and stuff.
Absolutely, because there's things that, you know, we did in the 90s that drove a lot of success that are still completely relevant to today. That, you know, there's certain principles and marketing techniques and tactics that are relevant no matter what time period or what platforms and how people are working, you know, change. But I mean, the big thing that has really changed is when we hit streaming, there was a fundamental shift in how consumers engaged with music. Everything up until that point for the history of the music business required somebody to go to a store, know what they wanted, and buy it, whether it was a download store or a store buying physical product. And it was a purchase decision. And music was all categorized by genre, and you had to know the artist, or you could browse some, and especially with physical media, if you weren't selling, you weren't going to be on the shelf. So music also had a shelf life. When downloads came, that idea started falling by the wayside. But streaming changed how consumers interact with music, and that a lot of times now they're searching by mood, by what activity they want to do. Things are categorized differently, and the way people interact with music has drastically changed. So like, for example, I have 2 daughters. They listen to a lot of music. One's almost 16. Pray for me. And the other one is 12 and a half. And they listen to a lot of music. They have I told them the other day that Friday was the day music was released. They had no idea. because that's not how they even think about it. Where when I was growing up listening to music, it's like, what's coming out on, this week, or what's new in the stores. And for them, music has release dates are irrelevant too, because they're listening on playlists that most of the music they listen to is because they heard it in a movie. They don't listen to radio. They the way that music is shared is completely different. And so as an artist, I look at that and go, yeah, if you don't understand how the shift has happened with consumers, you're going to have a hard time regardless. But a lot of people, they put on a playlist based on what they're doing. They're exercising, so they go get a hype up type playlist that's pump me up, and or they're studying, so they get a chill playlist, or and so it's just the way people think about and look for music is just drastically changed.
Like, because that is even though I knew all that, the fact that you're saying it makes me think I don't think about it enough. Like, so is that an issue? Do you find, like, you talk to a lot of artists that don't really take that into account? Because people like yourself, you're an artist yourself, you work in an organization that's focused on release dates, that's focused on all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's common for people to forget how people actually find and listen to new music? Or do you think people put themselves in that position enough, maybe?
Well, I talk to artists all the time that really wish the old ways were still in play. And I'm not talking about the streaming payouts and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about they still think of it as it's a purchase decision by consumers. And so they're focused so much on trying to get people to buy their music, which I'm going to make some general statements that when you have diehard fans, and the closer the fans get to you, like you're their number one artist, yes, you are trying to sell them stuff. But
yeah.
But the reality is, the streaming world, because people don't have to buy, what we saw is an expansion and explosion of the independent sector, because people were able to just go listen to something new. It wasn't a purchase decision that you were going to pay a penalty of $1 per track or $10 per album if you didn't like it. So people have the ability to experiment and try new things and they have. The average person's probably not like listening to a ton of different genres, but they're probably experimenting more than they would have otherwise. And so I'm always telling artists, because they still try to pitch their music when it's released as buy my music, buy my music, buy my music. And really all you're trying to do is get people to push a play button. That's not that hard. It's low friction.
Is it not that hard?
Well, it's
like,
come
on, that's Jesus. Well, people are going to be furious on here. Keep going. Sorry. Okay.
Stick with me for a second. It's harder. It's easier than telling them to give you $1 for something that they don't know what they want, or they've never heard of before, or $10 or $15. So all you're doing is asking them to push the play button. So in that space, as artists, it should be much easier to get creative in creating release strategies and ideas and things to engage your fans that make it fun and interesting to go push that play button, where most of the time everybody is just yelling, go buy my CD. It's like they're shouting like salespeople instead of doing something interesting and engaging that draws people in, like, oh, I got to check this out. And getting them to take action. I've got an example for you that I did. One of the things I was trying to do, I was trying to put together a campaign to get fans. We have so many, because of the age of our band, so many of our fans are on Facebook, and it drives me nuts because I'm like, I'm trying to get you off Facebook, but they're all there. And so we have a marketing platform that's free for anyone who signs up at CD Baby and creates an account. The marketing platform is called show.co. And we have these, what it is a lot of like marketing pages that are like single conversion point marketing pages. So someone lands there and they're being asked to do one action. There's no distractions by everything. So it's a nice way to funnel your fans and and you can use marketing pixels to follow up and all that. But I was just trying to get those fans to give me their email address or follow us on Spotify. And so the campaign I came up with is in our career at one point, we were playing at a concert. There was probably about 4,000 people watching us. And we started and we did this medley of cover songs from the 70s. And it was always a highlight of the show. And in the middle of that, all the sound went off, everything went off. Our road manager came on stage and we got asked to leave.
Oh no.
Because we were playing at a church and they had a no cover song policy and they neglected to tell us.
Wow.
Anyway, so I thought that's an amazing story. Let's turn that into a campaign. So I had an audio recording of a time when we had recorded that, not the time we got kicked off the stage because we didn't finish it. And I turned the campaign into hear the song that got us kicked off the stage. And so what I was trying to do is create this intrigue with people. They're like, what did these Christian boys do that's so terrible that they got thrown off the stage? I have to find out. And so that campaign, it performed so well. We got so many email addresses, so many Spotify follows, just because people see it. And it's like, now they're intrigued. Now they want to push that button. And that's what I mean by getting creative and just finding a way to get people to push that button, because oftentimes we're just shouting at them like we just want, do this because I say so. And like there's nothing in it for them. And that's what I think a lot of times in artist marketing, when they're releasing music, they don't think about the end user and how are you providing value for them. You're only thinking about the end result you want for yourself oftentimes. And I'm guilty of it as anybody, because as artists, I think the challenge we face is, especially if you've done an album, you've been through a long creative process that can be very draining and tiresome. It always costs more than you expected, always lasts longer than you expected. And you just want to get it done. And you're spent, you're emotionally drained, and you just want it out there. And it gets really easy to start just thinking about the end result you want and just shouting it out to the world, as opposed to like taking a breath, putting on your promotion hat and getting the creative juices flowing again, to start thinking about, okay, well, how do I create some creative storylines and interest around this that make it so much easier for people to want to push that play button.
So the way I'm reading this is, I think it's super interesting. There's two things going on here. One, that you're trying to create a level of curiosity.
Yes.
Because I think what I read from when you mentioned the tagline, a lot of people do that with press releases where they put something that's sort of clickbait, and that really doesn't achieve the goal. It just, people get disappointed. But if you create a level of curiosity about, oh, what do they mean about this? And then the second part I'm getting from this is that whatever it is you want them to do, you want to focus them on one action. Is that correct? That things are so chaotic these days that you can't ask them to do, well, if you take these 15 steps, I'll give you this at the end.
Yes.
And then people get lost along the way. Is that what you mean? That it's like pique people's curiosity and then get them to do the one thing? Is that sort of what would that be the two key points basically?
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the things, what that question you just asked is what I'll ask artists all the time, like when they're talking about release planning. I'll say, what is it that you're wanting your fans to do? Or when they're running a campaign, what is it exactly you want your fans to do? Because I can't tell. Either you're not being very clear and direct, you're not being interesting, or you're asking them to do like 10 things or 5 things at once, and it's confusing. I mean, that's where, in marketing, it's like you want to keep it as simple and easy as possible. It's like, tell them what you want them to do in a creative way, but make it clear that I'm having you do this so you'll click on this thing. And that's what that landing page I made for that campaign I talked about. It's like, hear the song that got us kicked off the stage, and it's like, follow us on Spotify to gain instant access. And so it's like they push the button to follow, they get instant access to hear the thing that we were talking about. And I like how you phrased it as curiosity, because there's a difference between piquing people's interest and curiosity than clickbait. Clickbait, it feels like you lied to me. You created some lame sensational headline, and then I clicked on it and that's not what was there, or the payoff was not anything worth to the degree of what you made it sound like.
False advertising. False
Yeah,
advertising.
it pretty much is.
Yeah. But I think like what's the expression? KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
I can't remember where I've heard that. Maybe it's like, I'm sure it's a universal marketing thing. But,
yes, it is. It is.
Okay, well, so we've got that, and we've discussed how things have changed over time, like how the markets have changed, like that there's a lot more competition, and the way people see music is different. But what are the underlying fundamentals that you think are still the same, like just as important as they ever were?
Well, I think some of the things that drove our success, even when we were on a label, most of the success we were having in the market was because our manager was this amazing grassroots marketing guy who had us going out directly to our fans in every city. We were so tired every day, just from morning till night. We'd be doing acoustic sets at college student centers. We'd be doing in stores, because music stores were everywhere. That's how people consume music back then. We'd be setting up it doing little acoustic sets in there. We'd be on air at radio stations, even radio stations that didn't play our music, that would be more than happy for us to stop by and play live on the air. And really what it was is like the idea of like, it's easy to think like, oh, I can't market my music because I can't, the newspaper's never going to cover me, or this or that, or the magazines or the websites, the cool music websites aren't going to cover me. It's like, no, you can go directly to the people, and the internet has only made that easier and easier and easier. And you just need to learn how to tell a compelling story, how to present yourself in a way that's interesting to people and have good music, and just go meet the people right where they are. And with the internet, there's so many options to do that. But also we have the internet, but we still have the real world. And I always tell artists, don't forget about the real world, because it's
IRL. What's that? What's IRL?
After the last couple of years, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So okay. So like we keep it simple, stupid, and go to where the fans are. All this we know what we're doing. So what does that mean in practice? Let's talk about, say, release planning. Mm-hmm. So because I'm assuming being organized is still something that has always been important. And like, if you've been at maybe this whole time, you must be able to mention like the top things that people screw up. Let's just do that. Let's do it. Let's do it that way. Yes, what are the things, not the best practices?
Yeah.
Just give me the don't do these 3 things and you'll be ahead of the game. What would those top 3 things be? Is it possible to say?
Yes, absolutely. Number 1 would be, absolutely do not set a release date until your music is done. Because what happens...
It sounds so obvious. But I'm assuming it's a problem. Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's what happened. I'm guilty of it as anybody. This is what happens. You go, okay, it'd be nice to release this in like what month are we? We're in September still.
September 27th.
They say it's like, okay,
2022.
Yeah, thank you. So it's one of those things where it's like, here's how it happened in the past a lot, was like, hey, we've got this really good show booked in 4 months. That would be an amazing release party, album release show. Let's make that our release date. But the music's not done. And then it gets moved back. It takes longer and longer and longer. And so many times I've seen artists were like, they're just scrambling to get it wrapped up so the music's even live on the release date, much less take advantage of all the opportunities that exist in the release process. So it still happens in the digital world. Like um, in with my band, I had one of my bandmates is like, let's set a release date and so we can announce the release date. I'm like, our music's not done. We don't know if we're going to be able to release it then. And we've done it where it's some of the times where
Your
we've had
band,
issues.
sorry to interrupt, your band must be so frustrated by you. He's like, oh, this guy knows everything. This guy knows everything.
Fortunately, it's usually paid off, and they're like,
Okay, good.
let's just let do what he says. But this last album we did was delayed by like 9 months, and this one band member kept saying, let's set a release date. I'm like, no. And all those arbitrary release dates were just to make and feel good about, to be able to say something. I'm like, what I want to make sure is that when our music is done, then we can take advantage of all those opportunities that exist in the release process. So not setting an arbitrary release date. The other thing is like getting that kind of is like I'll say it's number two, but it goes hand in hand with that. It's like not setting a release date, but the music's done, so now I want this out as soon as possible. I think artists, we get so excited, we hear the final mixes and masters, and we're just like, this is amazing, and we just got to get out there as soon as possible. And so, we'll get artists calling us up on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and release dates, you can release whatever day you want, but the universal release date is Fridays. And they'll be like, I want to get this out by this Friday. And we're like, we could do that for you. But again, you're just losing all these opportunities. Why would you want to do that? Well, I want to get it out there as soon as possible. It's going to be so amazing. Everyone's going to love it. I'm like, well, they'll love it even more if they actually hear it. And if you do some of these things, you'll have an opportunity to promote it to them, or promote it. And the other thing I think that's a big mistake that artists make is that they look at the release date as the end, like the finish line, and it's really the starting point. It's the way music is consumed, and it's really the start of the release process, because it's like the opportunities that exist before the music is available are worthy of shooting for. Some of them you might get, some of you might not. With like press and various coverage and all that kind of stuff. But after it's out is when your fans can actually do something with it. And so really thinking that that's really the starting point. The other thing,
is that three? I didn't know what, or we had two.
That was
two. And then you get, I'll give you an extra one. I'll give you an extra one.
There, I just had it, and it just,
oh, I'm sorry.
Man, what was it? It was another one that I talk to artists all the time about. Oh, I know what it is. I know it is. No. The other big mistake is not looking at artists. We often, it's like our latest release is our new baby. It's the one, this really sounds like me. Those other albums, but not building a catalog and really having a catalog mindset. I've talked to artists so many times, like, well, that old music doesn't sound like me anymore. Those old albums, can I take them down? I'm like, no, don't do that. Every artist, or most artists, I should say, that I see earning significant revenue at CD Baby, and by significant, I mean 6 figures or more. I've watched them do that by building a catalog. And every time you release a new album or a new song, your fans are engaging with your music again. Well, they can only listen to one song so many times before they got to move on. But if you've got a catalog, every time you release music, it becomes an event for them to go back and listen to all your old music as well. And that drives your growth of your catalog and revenue like crazy. And so really having this, I need to be building a catalog over time mentality. And that's why I think releasing albums still has immense value, because sure, people might handpick certain songs. They've done that through the history of the music business. But when you have more for them to listen to, if somebody likes that one song that's on a playlist and they want to go back and hear more, it's like now instead of having one song or 2 others to listen to, if they've got 20, they're going to go check out a lot more music and hopefully love it too. And so as you build more and more music, you just have more inroads into your catalog that really drives listenership and revenue ultimately.
I think like that insight about building a catalog is excellent, because I think you used to think of like when you go buy something, you go to the store and you look what they have and you just buy one, and you don't realize that, like, since it's all available, you're completely right that if an artist hears one song, they're going to go look around, and you know that they can dig deep without any cost to them. I think that's that's an exceptional piece of advice that I don't think about, and I never thought that back catalog would be the big success of streaming, because it seems to me, I don't know what you think about it, but I keep hearing more and more how older songs are being resurfaced in the most random ways, and
Absolutely.
it's fascinated.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of the points I was making when I mentioned my daughters, is that all these songs that, you know, like classic rock songs, they have no idea when they released. They could have been released last week
They're
for all
new to
they know.
them,
Yes, it's new to
yeah,
them.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and music has gotten to a point where it most music pretty much sounds timeless now. Once technology got to a certain point, yes, you can tell like certain trends and eras, but a lot of like what we marked eras in the past was like as technology advanced, production techniques changed and got better. But we're to a point where you can, you know, music just, there's so much variety that it doesn't, for people, younger listeners especially, it's all new to them. It just sounds, it's just a bunch of music that they can like or not like.
Yeah. Wow. That's like, I didn't even think of that. Like the idea that it's all new music to a certain extent. If you haven't heard it before, it's new to you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. So, okay, before we talk, I want to talk about a bit about release planning, but like we've got, there's some questions. The, so here we go. I'm just going to give you a couple, and then if anybody has any questions, my question is regarding this is from Shamalia. I hope I said that right, in Calgary, my hometown. My question is regarding sending the press release to media. How early should one? Oh, I can't believe this goes right into timelines.
Yeah.
How early should I send it? What is the date press release are typically published before the release? So is that maybe like a day of the week, or how long in advance? So that's a very good point. Do you have any experience with that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. And one thing I'd like to point out, we have a free tool anyone can use, even if you don't use CD Baby. The web address is release.cdbaby.com, and it's our release plan generator, and it actually helps you understand these timelines, because that answer is going to change depending on the type of press. So if you're looking for major media, which typically the average independent artist isn't looking for, like nationwide, or, you know, whatever your country you're in, because we've got artists from all over, you know, you're going to have media that's like national media. Then you're going to have more localized to your city oftentimes. And then in your city, depending on the size of your city, you might even have some subsections of that as well. So depending on the level you're trying to reach, it's going to take time. But with press release, and you're going to want to start that process at least 2 months in advance. And that process looks like, you know, getting a press release written. You know, if you're working with a PR person that's going to be pitching it, you know, they need time to actually, what they call pre-pitching, where they send it out to writers and they try to sell them on actually doing something with it, or to even look at it. You know, it takes them a while to even get them to get around to look at it and read it. And then
they need to ignore it first.
Yeah,
that's what I always say. Give them time to ignore it, forget about it, and then maybe think about reading it.
Yeah. And so that's why you gotta, I think oftentimes as artists, we forget that it's not just the day I send it, like, oh, my release is a month away. It's like, no, you got to allow time to actually get that person's attention to take a look at it. And then from there, when they get their attention, they've got their own editorial calendars. And it may be like, I've had an instance before. I can't remember if this was an older band I had, or a friend of mine's band, but they had the person said, I'd love to cover this, but Beyonce is releasing something this week and I have to write about that. So you got to understand that there's other things at play. And even if the person likes what you're doing, there may be some limitations based on their editorial calendar and what they're being asked to do. So that's why when you're thinking about press release and that kind of press, whether it's your local paper or your local music website, or a lot of cities have like a weekly entertainment focused newspaper. Those people, you want to give them 6 weeks to 2 months is a good timeline. The bigger you get, the further out you're going to need. Like Chris at work, who's on the podcast with me, he landed a huge feature in the LA Times. His publicist did it, got it for him. And that's major media, and it was a very nice big review. It was like a show review and had his photo in there. And I think they were working on that one for like 3 months. And so you just got to think about those timelines. And also, I think, like I said, what most artists forget is it's not the day you send the email, it's the day you actually get them to read the email and make a decision. That's the timeline.
Or getting them to read it at all is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
But
and you can get creative with it too. I've seen a lot of artists do some creative things to just like get people's attention.
And some of them work and some of them don't. But
Absolutely.
I have a promotion background, and giving people time to read the email you write is the best thing you can do. Like I really back you up on that. Like that, just getting in touch with people in the right timeline significantly increases your chances of accomplishing something. So if we think now, like back to this sort of release planning, like how do you, in sort of broad strokes, how do you usually recommend people do it? Like they can use this release generator, and I put that in the chat for everybody to look at, but like you're making an album, or you're making an EP, getting some tracks together. Should you start collating all the information at that point to plan? It's not like you finish making an album and then you start working on everything else. Shouldn't you be doing it or like, how do you recommend that artists sort of manage their time that way?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think you need to start with like, what are your goals for the release? Because
okay,
I think that's one thing that's very different these days, is that I think there's something what I like to call a season of release, and what I encourage artists to do and think about. Hey, there's this season of time period where I'm going to have things dropping, and the example I use often is like having a single or two, and giving a month for each single leading up to the album, and then the album drops, and then after that, streaming has also provided the opportunity that releases don't have to be so precious, and that I can do some live tracks off that album, I can do some remixes, and just keep giving people reasons to keep coming back to the music over a period of time, where there's just this ongoing musical dialogue about whatever, wherever I'm at in, our musical career. So if like the album is sort of the tent pole thing in that idea of a season of release. But, so if your single is just setting something else up, at minimum, you want to make sure that, I always say 2 weeks, because at minimum, you want to use the pitching tools that the digital service platforms like Spotify and Amazon are starting to make available to you as artists. Because like, for example, Spotify, if they have your music at least a week before its release date, it'll show up in your Spotify for Artists account. You can use their pitching tool, and they ask for a bunch of extra information, and you can, it says it pitches it to their editors, which that's kind of like, a long shot. But when you use that tool, it'll push your new release to all your fans through Release Radar, Discover Weekly. And so it's like, why wouldn't you allow that time to make sure that your fans know that you have a new release? With Amazon, that tool is available up until 2 weeks after the release. So they let you use that tool after the release date. And I think it's like starting a week out as well. They have to have the music in the system at least a week out. So like if you got in their system a month out, you'll be able to use the tool, same as Spotify. So the point being is that if you're trying to release something in less than a week time, weeks worth of days, you won't have access to that tool. And so for those singles that are setting up an album, you want to make sure you're at least allowing enough time to use that, because those become the promotion items that start building momentum for the actual album release. And that helps you tell the story that, hey, there's new music coming. So instead of just shouting, we've got a new album coming out this date, we got a new album coming out this date, and you just keep saying the same thing over and over again, you have new music that drops, and it's like, oh, your fans get a small bite. Oh, then they get another small bite. Now they get the whole meal, and now they get the follow-up with all the other interesting things that you can do, like remixes, live tracks, alternate mixes, and all that kind of stuff.
And so, like, just before I go to the next question, the one thing I like about the sort of the season of releases or whatever, I think is really good is I know a lot of artists feel under pressure to get everything right. And I think that's completely impossible. So the idea that you do different types of releases over time means that you can learn as you go. And the idea that what you didn't do on what you screwed up or didn't do on the first release, you can learn and do it on the next one. And that it is a building process, because artists are under so much pressure to get things right. The music's got to be right, and I've got to do this, and how do I get this done? And I think it's so important that it's just like, you're not going to get everything right. And it's a building process. Is that not correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how I look at it as well. I think I see in the chat, one of the questions are, what are some good goals to set when releasing music? You know, I'll get to that in a second, but when you set some goals, it's like, you're like, well, if I didn't hit it, or we hit one of them, but because when on the next one, I'm going to tweak this thing and I think we'll have a better chance of hitting that goal. But some of the goals, like I set for my self when releasing music, is like, okay, for a single, it'd be great. You know, we're independent artists. It'd be great to have 10,000 streams for it by the end of the first week. Okay. And then you have to kind of work backwards. Well, how am I going to do that? And the idea of having goals is it's supposed to help focus your activity in the right direction, because oftentimes with marketing, and this isn't just for music, it's just marketing in general, people don't set a goal. So they just take stabs in the dark in all different directions, and it doesn't really move towards one thing. And so when they don't reach their, don't have success, it's hard to pinpoint what went wrong. And so it's like setting that goal and defining what it is helpful. Another a really great goal around release is like, hey, in the pre-release portion, like when we're building up to release, I want to grow our Spotify followers by 1,000. I'm just throwing out random numbers here. And okay, how am I going to get people to follow us on Spotify? Well, there are tools, and I mentioned one that, like an idea that I did, that say, okay, when I can use this tool, come up with a creative campaign and get people to follow us on Spotify. That way, as our album is being released, Spotify sees a lot of activity of people following us. And then when it comes out, Release Radar will push the track to all those people. And so oftentimes you'll have fans that like your music, they just haven't clicked the follow button. There's lots of bands I love and just haven't thought to click the follow button when I've had it on Spotify, or it was inconvenient, or I was on my phone and didn't think to push it. And so it's like, so that's another goal. Like, how can I increase these followers? So when the drops, Release Radar will push it to all of them. So that's a couple ideas.
No, and I think like the idea of, you can even just make up some number that you think is realistic. And then if you don't hit it, you realize, oh, okay, I was being unrealistic in my goals, but now I understand what maybe I can accomplish. Like, yeah, I think it's so hard that people don't realize just how much experimentation is going on, even for people like, surely like yourself, you know exactly what you're doing, but you're winging it like everybody else, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the goal, and as artists, it'd be very easy to kick yourself and get all down when you don't hit a goal. The goal is really just there to focus your work in a specific direction that you think will help guide success. Don't fixate on the number. oftentimes you don't know if it's ambitious or not. Sometimes you might have shot really low, and but it's really just like looking at what will really help us. Okay, this thing will help us. So making sure all your activity are moving towards that thing. Um, and yeah, so for me, when I'm doing those things, it's like, for me, it's just really to help make sure I'm not doing what a lot of people do and just start taking stabs in the dark, or doing a lot of things that may be fine but are lesser priority. And so it helps you also prioritize, because there's lots of things you can do, and all of them could be great, but you only have so much time and effort that you can give. And so it just, you know, make sure that at the end of the day you feel like you did what you could, and then you can go back and learn from it. Like I know artists don't think about like looking at data much, because it's like spreadsheets, what numbers. That's why I got into music, so I didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
But there's so many stories and helpful things in data when you're doing marketing campaigns, where you can see, oh, you know what, why my campaign didn't work is like everything seemed to be going good, and this one thing I asked them to do just was confusing and they all got lost. Okay, well, I need to fix that thing. And so once I fix that, let's try it again and see if now it makes sense and it works. But there's just, that's one of the things I always have to remind myself after, the release of new music, is to go back, mine the data, see what songs are working, what's connecting. Is it tied to the activities I was doing? Is something else happening that's moving things forward? Was it the songs I thought that they would like? There's a lot of good info in those things that help you inform the next release.
Because I like, before I get to Jamie, do you want to throw in the chat? We had some pre-questions that we should get to, but I think what's interesting in what you're saying is it's like, it's just lots of questions. You're asking, you're being very curious about like, what is it like? What did I know? What didn't I know? What can I learn? And I think like people, instead of thinking that they don't have the answers or that there's some elusive one answer, it's more like just think of what you want to know and try to answer those questions, and it'll lead you in a direction that maybe will bring you to some sort of level of success or insight. Is that correct? Like that it's just maybe about being curious?
Yeah, I would say so, because I mean, the one thing is what works today won't necessarily work 5 years from now. So like the idea of like, or what worked for another artist may not work for you. It's there's mystery around music and art and how people perceive it and what connects and what doesn't. At our conference recently, I reminded everybody, we're not widget makers. We're not making something that's a commodity that just sits on a shelf that, people go to the store and it's like, do I want that version of that or the other version? Oh, okay, well, I'll get that one. It's like music connects to people's soul in various ways and does things that beyond what we can even measure at times. And so that's why it's like, to me, it's just about being curious and creating a process that helps you feel like you're moving in a specific direction and doing things that have had a pattern of success. And then looking at it, because again, things change over time. And so if you go, oh, I found the silver bullet, well, that silver bullet's probably not going to work 2 releases from now or 3 releases, because the way people interact online changes, the way people market changes. It's the way people discover music is evolving. So that's why I think being curious and really understanding what you're trying to accomplish is helpful.
And I think that word, you use the word process, and it really is a process. It's, it is a discovery process. So this is a pre-question 1. From the perspective of an artiste, not artist, artiste with an E at the end, very important, with little budget, what are other ways to increase monthly listens and streams away from playlisting? Because playlisting isn't guaranteed. I think that's super insightful. What do you think about that?
Well, little budget could impact this first part of the answer, is that releasing more music is always, I mean, the one thing I think that's interesting now with all these things we've been talking about is the act of releasing music is a promotion act now. When I release music and it gets pushed to my fans, that is a promotion activity. So
Huh.
releasing music is promotion in and of itself, because those things, these platforms are doing that for you. That wouldn't have been the case in the download or CD world, because your music could sit there and go to no one. If you have a tiny bit of budget, the biggest bang for your buck with some of the options out there is Facebook ads. And that also includes Instagram, and they just enabled where you can now boost Instagram Reels. So that's an option. So I always get hesitant when start talking about advertising, because you can drop a lot of money, and if you don't know what you're doing, waste it all.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but Facebook ads, they typically, for beginner advertisers, they're still affordable, and they have some options that make it real easy. Like, even just, advertisers will say, never push the boost button. Well, that's because they're wanting to do much bigger, more advanced campaigns. But even just like having a nice promo thing, hitting boost, and making sure that all your fans know that there's new music out, you can do for very cheap. Making videos is also another really easy thing to do now.
So like YouTube video types, like that kind of, or video on social media.
Video on social media, all the
Okay.
platforms love
Yeah.
video more than anything. So for example, if you're able to do a quick little snippet, like video, like showing there's new music, and you want the video to look interesting, but those perform much better, and they also perform better as ads as well.
Okay.
People watch videos more than they'll look at a static image. And that's why, that's why these platforms are constantly evolving, where now, if you're a big Instagram user, you've probably noticed a big decline in the activity on your feed. That's because Instagram's not pushing the main feed to people as much. They really want people using Reels. And if you use Reels, you'll see far more activity around what you're posting than you will just on the regular feed. But in general, going back to the question, like, you can reach a lot of people, especially if you both your followers and potential people that Facebook would think might like your music. For $20, you can reach a lot of people. And so even if you have like something like $50, you can do a lot. And I know we're talking to a very international audience here, so so I can't convert for everybody's money, but
no, but I think but you're also saying like don't keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate it. Like, you don't need to do some complex campaign. Just use the boost button. I think there's a lot of insight in that, because people think, oh, that's never going to work. But it's like actually it's the first step in the right direction or whatever.
Yeah, and
okay, so
Facebook's really done a lot to make that more effective than it used to be. So yeah.
Okay, and then this next pre-question is along the same way. What does social media marketing mean to you, and what are the best industry practices? That's pretty broad, but I think it sort of follows on from what we were discussing.
Yeah, I think one thing, social media marketing is not sitting on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook all day, just mindlessly scrolling. Talk to artists all the time.
Dead scrolling. It's not dead scrolling is not part of the plan.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it's still, using social media is great. I think one thing that's important is that you look at it as storytelling. You're trying to tell an interesting story. And you want people to be engaged. And social media, like the questions, like you said, it is pretty broad. Different platforms reward different kind of content. So understanding what's working on that platform is great. The one word of caution I have for artists, and it's hard to get real specific because artists can be all over the map in what they do and what their goals as an artist. Some want to be on tour, some want to just build audiences online. I mean, there's so many different strategies and ideas of how to go about it. But I always tell artists that if you feel like you're just on a social media hamster wheel, just running and not really understanding what you're getting out of it, or how it's benefiting your music, it might not be. And if it's not, there's no reason you need to do it, because if it's not building your audience. And the other thing being that when you build an audience on social media, you should be darn sure you're trying to get them off social media as much as you can, where you have an email address, some sort of way where you own the relationship, because social media platforms come and go, or they make it harder and harder and harder for you to reach your fans. Facebook, when you posted something years ago, all your followers would see it. Now you have to basically pay. And they all kind of go through that cycle of having this time where it's a sweet spot, it's really working, and people see what we're doing, to like, hey, it feels like no one's seen what I do anymore. So as you build audiences in these places, ideally it's because it's not some, side gimmick you're doing, but it's related to your music. And as you build those audiences, because it's a great communication, a lot of them are great communication platforms, but that you were being intentional and offering those people that really like your music a deeper connection to you, so you own that relationship.
So I think we should make this the last question, because also quickly, like for everybody on this call, like Jamie, where's that Digital Launch Academy link? We're actually doing a much more in-depth one-day event on this stuff together with Byta and CD Baby. So we should, anybody who wants to come to that should sign up. But let's make this the last question, because it's super detailed. Let me read it out. With my goal being to perform and to have a fan base buying merch in a few countries in Europe, I'm currently running my ads to multiple countries with one ad. Would it be best to separate the ads per country? And if so, how long should I promote to each country before moving on to the next one? That is pretty interesting, because it's about where do I put my focus. So what do you think on that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the my answer would be it depends.
No,
depends.
that's the wrong answer. We want a simple one word, do this answer, please.
Well, without knowing,
I'm joking.
I haven't seen the ad. So if those countries are speaking in different languages, even if English is a language that is used in those countries, like I know a lot of Europeans speak English, but it may not be their first language. I would have versions of those ads in their first language, because it'll feel more local. It'll feel more like you're talking to them. But also I would say that why I say it depends is because you could have some very specific hooks that hook into whether it's something related to their culturally that's relevant in their country. I mean, you can think about it that way if you're thinking about people in general. There's some people are in various types of social groups or do certain things and trying to appeal to that group. So understanding what type of person likes your music, or if there's a connection in those countries, like if you're playing shows all across and there can be a connection that ties it in the ad, then I would definitely run separate ads. I don't think you have to. I've certainly done ads worldwide that were the same ad everywhere, and you can optimize for that. So to me, that's where you got to go to the data and understand, is everything performing equally across the board? Because if it is, then it's probably fine. If you're looking at the data and a country where you've seen some success, it looks like selling merch, but your ads aren't performing well in that country, maybe you need to tailor that ad for that local audience, because there might be a cultural disconnect. The way you're talking about it may not make sense. And so that's sort of the like language, even in, I'm in the US, in the UK, for some reason, they use an S instead of a Z on some of the words. And so it very much stands out.
Indeed they do. Indeed they do.
I don't know why, but,
but it's because everybody in North America is spelling it wrong. But anyway, I think what's also really important with this question is the idea that, like, don't overcomplicate it again.
True. Yes. Again,
Start
yes.
a certain way. If you want to run the same ad in all countries because it's easier, try that and see how it goes. But you don't
Yeah.
want to jump through the steps, because I find personally, even trying to learn any of these ad platforms as an individual or someone who doesn't do it as a full-time job, it's very, very, very overwhelming. And
Yeah,
it's like you'll find the answer based on the steps you take and the questions you ask. Just like what's the ad look like, what language is it, all those things are really where your answer is going to lie. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and I think you're correct in saying that start simple, because you've got to learn as you go. If you start super complicated, then you've instantly increased so many variables that you don't even understand, and complicating these platforms, and that can be very labor intensive to use correctly. So to me, it's like, start with a simple ad that you think will connect. Did it work? Did it work in all those countries? If so, then great. If not, then start with optimizing the ad itself, like the idea. And then as you get more comfortable and time allows and budget allows, then you can start getting a little bit more fancy and splitting things up. But keep starting simple is the best way with all these things.
So yeah, instead of keep it simple, how about this is what I want to end on. SS, start simple.
Yeah, there you go.
Start simple, and then later on keep it simple, but at the start simple. And I think that is the best place to end, because it's too easy to go off in so many directions to figure out all these different variables. And really what you want to do is you just want to take a couple simple steps and build from there ultimately, I guess, right?
Yeah, because yes, I think oftentimes, and I've done it myself, I've gotten real deep in some of these ad platforms with music and running all these things and funnels, and it gets really challenging even just to manage it, even when you know what you're doing. So it's like, you don't want to start there. Start with, like, it should be fun and creative and feel like you're creating something that's interesting, that makes people want to check out your music or your merch or whatever you're advertising. And if you overcomplicate it, things, I usually think the creative part, the thing that will attract people in the first place, suffers.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, that's great. So yeah, Digital Launch Academy, everybody check that out, because there'll be more of this chat over one full day. It's going to be tiring. I'm going to get information overload. But Kevin, thanks so much. Thanks from dialing in from the hotel lobby next to the elevator.
Not a problem.
It's much appreciated. And thanks everybody for coming. And if you need, Kevin, if you want to throw any contact details you have, or the best way for people to get a hold of you, or your LinkedIn or whatever you're comfortable with, do that.
I just dropped it in. I'm at K Breuner usually on Instagram is the best place to get me. Like,
all right, cool. There you go. That's very 2022 of you. All right, cool.
All right. Well,
listen,
for having
thanks
me,
so much, and have a great time in Atlanta. And then thanks everybody for coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll wave everybody off as I do.
Yeah. Take it easy.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.